started now. Oh, hello, welcome everyone. If you were here last workshop, you would have heard this spiel, but let's go again. My name is Arrow Yurin Chung. I go by she, her, and I'm this year's shootout coordinator. A brief explanation, the Asian American Film Lab is a nonprofit devoted to the promotion and support of gender, racial parity in film and television programming, and the 72-hour shootout, which I think a lot of people here are registered for, is the Film Lab's annual global filmmaking competition celebrating diversity in front of and behind the camera. This workshop is part of the Shootouts programming to increase accessibility and help our fellow filmmakers to take a step further into their career or artistic endeavor. So I'm going to start by introducing our amazing workshop instructor, Tyler Ham Pong, who is also joining us as our judge this year and shootout coordinator 2 years ago, and also shootout alum. So he has a lot of juices, tips, ideas to pour it into the shootout. But I specifically asked him to lead our editing workshop because how do you edit a short film less than 72 hours? So tell us all of your secret tips, Tyler.
Yeah, for sure. Great. Well, I'll go ahead and share the PDF in the chat for everybody, but I'll screen share it right now and we'll just kind of go into it. Here we go. So what is editing? You can see here that it says an editor can be the director, writer, acting coach, the composer, all the other jobs rolled into one because the editor controls the final image. They control how the audience views everybody else's hard work. So they can highlight everything that works and hide anything that might break the suspension of disbelief. And if that's true, then the opposite can be true. An editor can accidentally bury the moments that you really love and show the moments that you don't. So that's why an editor needs to have a keen eye and a really good taste level. And I mean, this is really fast. You're making a movie in 72 hours. That's 5 minutes long. So I'll go through my kind of workflow. I'll give you kind of quick tips and stuff, but we'll discuss the editor's toolbox, how to set yourself and your editor up for success, interface basics, my workflow. Now I work on Final Cut Pro. So I try to keep this as general as possible, but my workflow will be catered to Final Cut Pro. I'm curious actually if what everybody uses here as an editor tool. If you want to say it in the chat, I'm curious. And if you have any other questions throughout this whole thing, go ahead and leave the question in the chat. And then we'll go on to more fun, creative stuff like types of edits, and then just some finishing touches with color and sound, because I'm sure in the real world as an editor, you'll have other people to do color and sound, but in this kind of fast 72-hour format, you're likely going to be in charge of color and sound yourself. So I'll just give you a couple of tips on how to do that in your editor. And then at the end, we'll do a quick Q&A, and in the final page, there are links to resources, and I'll discuss them as we go along. Let's see. Oh, look at this. Somebody uses WeVideo. Oh, that's cool. And Premiere. Okay. I mean, Premiere is, we'll get into that next. Premiere is, and DaVinci Resolve are really high up there. They're, I would consider advanced software. See, I use Final Cut Pro, but Adobe's up here and Avid is up here. Avid is more for a lot of people in reality TV and docuseries will use Avid. But there's also, you don't always have to be at the top. You don't have to use this advanced software, especially if you're doing a quick project like the 72-hour shootout. Sometimes this free beginner software that's built into your computer will be just enough. And for people who are Mac users, iMovie is a fantastic resource. It's actually made by the same company that does Final Cut. So if you're familiar with iMovie, it's an easy way to jump over to Final Cut Pro. And yes, iMovie is very underrated. Thank you. But the other version of that for Windows is Windows video editor, which is built into to Windows. So at the end of this project, at the end of this this slideshow, I have links to a free download of iMovie Apple for Apple users, and then links to instructions on how to use Windows Video Editor for PC users. But that being said, editing is really an everyday life, you know, with TikTok and Instagram Reels. In the old days, they used to edit in camera. Like in those old black and white films, you would see that they film the scene once, they cut, then they move on to the second scene and film the movie sequentially in that order. That's kind of how TikTok and Instagram encourage their in-app editors. But now, of course, with modern technology, we have the luxury of doing multiple takes and choosing the best take in the editor. So if you are familiar with TikTok and Instagram, that gives you a head start on how to edit. So let's talk about how to set yourself up for success. Now, I don't know how many people are both in charge of filmmaking and editing, but there are some things you can do in the filmmaking process to make your life easier as an editor. So you want a smoother workflow so that you can edit faster and you can make the deadline. And one of those things you can do as a filmmaker, setting yourself up for the editor, is to clap Slate, especially if you're recording sound separately from video. You'll want to use a clap Slate so you can sync that later. And standard camera settings are 24 frames per second for that film kind of feel. And you'll want your audio settings to be 48 kilohertz because that matches up with the camera settings of 24 frames per second. If they're a little bit different, you know, you can live with it. You can, but like really, then the audio and camera settings start to slide if they don't have the same kind of divisible rate. So if you're shooting 24 frames per second, set your audio for 48 kilohertz and make sure to clap that Slate at the beginning of your take. If you don't have a physical Slate like this, you can literally just clap your hands. And that's a great tool for the editor to line everything up. Now you'll also want to make sure that you get lots of coverage to give your editor stuff to work with. The standard, we'll talk about standard scene progression. So let's say in a standard movie, it'll start in the extreme long shot. You see, this is from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And over this like 5-minute scene, as the music increases and tension grows, it goes into a long shot and it gets closer and closer and closer until eventually there's the shoot off. So that's standard scene progression. I would say like you definitely want to get as much coverage as you can in the time that you have, and that's generally how a scene is edited together. That being said, you can absolutely be creative with the order that you ordered the clips. It doesn't have to start with an extreme long shot working its way up to extreme close up. Sometimes it goes the opposite way. If you just want to start on somebody's eyes and then later in the scene you reveal something that we didn't know in the wide shot. So you can be creative with what you're trying to tell the audience and what you're trying to hide from the audience. But you definitely want to get coverage so that there's stuff to edit, to cover up and to work with. And I'll also be including a YouTube video at the end of this clip, at the end of this slideshow, that talks about different types of shots. And that's where this, I believe the screen grab is from. So there's a video that can go into further detail about different types of coverage. I also want to make a note that you want to leave room to edit. I see a lot of people on set. Will press record, yell action, and the actor goes straight into it. And then because it's so fast, you lose like some of the actor's first line. Or like if you yell cut and then cut immediately after, you don't have anything to play with. There's this great example in Star Wars, A New Hope, where they didn't have enough footage of, it's this specific clip here, it's a couple minutes in, but they didn't have enough footage of the Tusken Raider attacking Luke. So they use the same shot twice, and then they loop it to make it feel twice as long. So it's like a boomerang. So he's like lifting his arms, he brings them back down, and he lifts his arms. It kind of looks like he's just like there waving around. But if you notice it, you see that it's literally a boomerang in Star Wars. What they did here was a fantastic fix, but it's an editor's nightmare. So don't put yourself in a position where you don't have enough footage. Resist the temptation to yell cut as soon as the action is over. Let it breathe a few seconds before yelling cut. And your editor will be super happy with you. All right, let's move on to types of edits. This is fun because this is where you can show your creativity as an editor. We can go through each one of these basically, but like it just gives a description of what each kind of shot is. And these are just the basic types of edits. There are more advanced, there are different ones, but this is your basic toolkit of types of edits. A hard cut is just a standard cut between two clips. There's anything special about that. A match cut is very creative, and it's when the composition of two clips match each other. For example, a shot of the world cuts to a shot of the baseball. Now you can use this in a setting like, let's say the movie is about a baseball player and the dialogue is, or the voiceover says, baseball mattered as much to him as the world. So, or in everything in the world, baseball was the most important thing to him. And that would be like the perfect opportunity to show a shot of the world and then have it crossfade with a shot of a baseball. So that's what a match cut would be, when you set up the composition of two clips to match each other. A jump cut is a cut within a clip that gives the feeling of a jump in time. This is from the Royal Tenenbaums. This is this famous sequence where Luke Wilson cuts his beard and cuts his hair. And obviously this would take like, half the movie for him to do himself, but they play it to music and they do jump cuts where it's like, oh, now half his hair is gone. Oh, now all his hair is gone. Oh, there's his beard. Oh, there's his final kind of look. And they compress this, what would be like a 30-minute, hour-long real-time moment into, 1 minute and 30 seconds or 2 minutes, however long it is. So that's what a jump cut is. It also creates like this sense of chaos. So like if you're trying to emulate that feeling of uneasiness or chaos, a jump cut is a great way to do that. Let's see. The montage is fairly self-explanatory. You see it not just in like every movie, but it's also made fun of in many movies. But it's just like a series of different clips that show the passage of time, often set to music. It's the most famous montage I can think of is the Rocky montage, where Rocky is working out and training to box. So I'd say that's the most famous montage that I can think of. Cut on action. I love the cut on action, honestly, because it's like one of the most natural cuts that the audience barely notices it because they're mostly focused on the action. And let's say like this is the clip where we're starting on the right side of this guy who's taking a drink. Then as soon as the glass reaches his mouth, we jump to the right side of him. Now this action is so fast that, the jump to the other side doesn't feel as jarring and the audience just kind of buys into it. So cutting on action is definitely a very is a very effective way to edit and to edit seamlessly without really the audience knowing. And the cutaway shot, I thought this was important to note because it's basically a shot that's inserted into a continuous cut. Now, it sounds very basic, but it's a great way to cover up empty spaces in scenes. For example, if the filmmaker crosses the line in the scene or crosses the 180 rule, and both actors are supposed to be looking at each other, but for some reason they're both looking right, that can be visually jarring to the audience. But if you start on actor A, you go to a clip of something completely different, then you jump back to the scene. Hopefully the audience forgets that you crossed the line, and the cutaway is a nice way to cover that accident. So and I've done this recently too. It's actually like it's a very smart way to just kind of cover up any accidents in these kinds of scenes. So get coverage. As I said, you want to get coverage, not just coverage of the actors, but you can get coverage of the scene. You can get coverage of people's hands, or details on their articles of clothing, or details of like wildlife in the area, just to kind of fill out the scene and have cutaways just in case the stuff that you covered yourself didn't necessarily work. All right, these are interface basics. We won't go over too much of this because I don't want to waste too much time when everybody works on different editors. But basically, if you want to refer to this later in your own time, this will tell you kind of where everything is. But the most important of all the tools is, I would say, the blade, because out of all of these, the blade can pretty much do every single one of these things just in its own way. So if you learn to do anything, the blade is your most important tool. It helps you adjust the start and end points of each clip in the timeline. So I honestly think it's the most important. If you learn to use like the trim and all these other tools, that's makes it faster for you. But the blade tool is the most effective way to edit. If you know how to blade, you know how to do anything. Your transitions and effects will be very important for you. The transitions obviously can help you bridge gaps together, and the effects, we'll get into this later, but the effects can help you create a quick color grade, or you can create a cool, it's like a filter on Instagram or TikTok. That's what effects basically are. And the audio meter will also be very important for you for mixing the audio later. It's a visual representation of the sound level, so you can be precise when you're adjusting the audio levels in your edit. Okay, let's move on to the workflow. This is just a basic workflow of how I do it. Once you have all your footage, I would download all your footage and audio from the memory cards onto a hard drive or onto your computer. Do not edit off the memory cards. That's a recipe for disaster, because if you eject your memory card and everything gets unlinked, that's a mess. So save all your footage and audio in a safe place or two on your computer or hard drive. Import them into your editor. If you create proxy clips, it's faster editing. Now, what a proxy clip is a smaller version of the clip that you filmed. So if you filmed in 8K, which is huge, it's going to take forever to edit because your computer is going to be slowing down trying to catch up to that 8K footage. So creating proxy footage is like creating a 1080 or 720 version of that clip and using that to edit, so your computer doesn't melt down from the amount of data that it's processing. Honestly, though, for the shootout, I wouldn't shoot more than 4K. 4K is probably your sweet spot for how fast you can edit versus quality. Yeah, and then you'll edit in your timeline, and I'd say sync your footage to audio as you go. Don't wait to the end. We talked about that earlier, about syncing audio with footage using the clap slate as see the clap slate, using the sound of the clap slate to line everything up. So you see here, in our media bank, we have the audio and the clip. We just drag them into the timeline, and then in the audio you'll find, or in the video you'll find where the slate was, and and Jamie here, my co-owner at Kill the Pig Productions, she would say like scene 1A, take 1, and then there'd be a loud clap, which you can see in the audio levels here. So that makes it a lot easier to line up, because if you don't do that, then you're just lining it up based on the actor's delivery of the lines. And if they're, they're an actor, they'll do it usually the same time or a close variation thereof. So it's really hard to line it up if you're just basing it off the actor's dialogue. So yes, slates are super important. So let's get on to the finishing touches. And before I talk more about the finishing touches, I just also wanted to mention that at the end of this PDF, there is another video about types of edits, which talks about all this and more types of edits. So you can definitely watch that and learn more about the types of edits at the end of this PDF. So finishing touches, I'll go over color correcting and color grading really quickly. Color correcting is balancing all the shots in the scene to match. So it's more of correcting the color, and color grading is more artistic. Color grading is manipulating the colors and exposure to achieve a stylized look. Like look at Mr. LaBeouf right here. Look how orange he is. This is what we would call a teal and orange grade. The shadows and the dark colors are more of that teal, and then the midtones are more of this kind of orange feel. And that's a very action movie kind of color grade that they have here. So the color that you give your film will definitely affect the way that the audience perceives it. Like The Matrix here gave this kind of green computery grade versus like what the original color is. His skin tones are very natural. And as you see here, the different genres you can create different moods for different genres. Obviously, this isn't a be all and end all, some genres might look different or vary within these colors, but that's just kind of an idea to give you, let's give you an idea of how you can create tone with color. And in your editor, if you have a color wheel, that's how you can adjust color, or a color curve is how you can adjust color. Now for this teal and orange, I would take the shadows and pull them towards this teal color, and I would take the midtones and pull them a little bit towards this orange color. And that's how you get this teal and orange. So I would play around with it. Also, filters, like I was saying, effects are helpful to do this for you. They'll literally put the grade on your footage, but if you want something more custom, you can do it yourself in these color wheels. And another quick tip to kind of bump up the contrast is to create an S curve on your color curve. On the you increase the shadows to create this darker color, and then you bring up the highlights to brighten up the highlights. So it creates more contrast in the final image. And if you create an S curve, you can kind of control how that contrast looks. And it's more custom than just turning up the contrast in an image. Obviously, if you're strapped for time, turning up the contrast and throwing a filter on it is almost just as effective. But if you want to get a little more custom, use the color curves and the color wheels to create a grade just for yourself. As we go into sound design, we won't talk too much about it because I want to leave time for questions, but the overall recommended levels for sound mix are -6 decibels to -20. This kind of varies. Some people have different opinions of it, but you shouldn't go over 0. That's when things start peaking, and you definitely shouldn't let these green and yellow bars peak and hit red. When they hit red, that's too loud. It's going to be mixed way too loud. So you want your overall mix to be -6 to -20, and you can adjust the audio in your editor. And definitely an important tip for editing is to make sure to get room tone at the beginning when you're filming, or at the end when you're filming, just so that you have audio to edit with that's clean audio. Now, room tone is like 10 to 30 seconds of ambient noise from the location that you're filming. It kind of works as a band-aid in audio editing. If you record room tone, you can cover up somebody's cough in the background, or if a car drives by and honks its horn, the room tone is a nice way to edit over some of that ambient noise, as long as it's not over somebody's dialogue. Let's see, I have tips here for, oh yeah, you should definitely turn off nearby electrical devices that have an audible hum. That'll make it easier for editing. Otherwise, in editing, you'll have to do hum removal and noise reduction and use compressors, which are fine. But if you are strapped for time, it's just an extra step that that adds workflow. But if you do have time, I included a link to download Audacity at the end of this PDF, and a link to an article about sweetening audio in Audacity. And that's what I use to sweeten my audio when I'm editing. So and the article that I provided is actually very helpful, and it provides instructions on how to do the most basic things that you need to really sweeten the audio and make the actors have a fuller voice, remove the background noise. Audacity has a lot of tools that are helpful for that. You also have these tools in your editors like Final Cut Pro or iMovie. I'm sure has that. I'm sure Premiere has that as well, but they're video editors, so their audio tools aren't as advanced as, say, an audio editor. So definitely you can use the tools within the editor, but if you have Audacity or any other audio sweetening software, you can add that to your workflow as an editor. That brings us to pretty much the end. You're almost there at the end of the 72 hours. You're running up against the clock and you just have a few minutes left. Just remember to give yourself time to export from your software and time to upload to Vimeo or YouTube, because those can take an unexpected amount of time. It could be minutes if you're exporting 1080 and there's no graphics on it. But if you downloaded a plugin and put some crazy graphics into your movie and shot on 8K footage, then it's probably going to take a couple of hours to export. And if you didn't keep that in mind, then it's a shame if you missed the deadline because of the export. So definitely give yourself time to export. I don't know why I included this Zoolander picture. I just love it. Maybe that dates me a bit. But yes, the files are inside the computer. So give yourself time to get them out. And that's pretty much it. I wanted to include all these resources for you guys at the end, the free iMovie download. Here's instructions for Windows Video Editor. Here's different shot types. Here's 13 different creative film and video editing techniques. Here's the free Audacity download and instructions on how to use Audacity. Here's one that I didn't talk about at all. It's royalty-free music and sound effects and all sorts of royalty-free stuff here on Pixabay. This will be a wonderful resource for you if you're looking for free music. So definitely hit that up and check it out. That's basically it from my end. I'm sorry if I went through some of this stuff a little fast. We have a little over 5 minutes and I wanted to leave some time for questions just in case. So yeah, if anybody has questions, I can open it up to you guys, and I'll go ahead and stop sharing the screen. Yeah, if anybody has any questions, let's see. Paul Smith, you have your hand raised. Yeah, go ahead.
A little comment and a little question. The comment is when you're talking about montages and editing. One example I think of is that Odessa's step sequence in Battleship Potemkin. And the filmmaker who made that movie, he said that to him, a montage is where when you're cutting and you're sticking two images together, his objective is to create a third image that you don't actually see on the screen, but that occurs in the viewer's mind. And if it's a movie about people, almost getting at the psychology of the people through the way you juxtapose those two images. That's how he was talking about montage. My question is, if what keeps an audience watching your movie, whether it's a 5-minute film or a 2-hour film, it's to me, it's going to be the excitement level. And so my question is, what are some ways of generating excitement in the way you're editing your movie?
That's an awesome question. Yeah, I think pacing is a great way to set the speed of the excitement. Definitely, if you want it to be more exciting, then you put a faster pace to the editing, and not only will the pace increase it, but music can also increase the I forgot the word that you used, but the action, the excitement in a scene. Music can definitely underscore that. So those are just two ways of doing it. But I loved your comment about how a montage is using images to create a tertiary image in the audience's mind, because that's spot on. That's definitely a smart observation.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the videos that I supplied too at the end of the PDF, they talk about different kinds of editing techniques as well. So there are some additional ones, but the ones that I covered are the most used, the most basic. I mean, even if you go on TikTok, there are editing transitions that people have been doing that aren't even, used in film. So you can get creative too with modern filmmaking techniques. But unless anybody has any other questions, I can hand it back to Ariel for some final words. And but before I do that, I just want to say thank you all for coming, and I'm so excited to see everybody's movies. I'm so excited to be a judge this year. So I hope you learned something from this workshop, and go ahead and download the PDF and use it for yourself.
Well, thank you so much, Tyler. I'm pretty sure this is very useful because 72 hours, how do you make a movie within that? And also, like, not just film it, but compose it in a way that actually matches your vision of it. So thank you so much for everyone coming out. I know that every time we do a workshop, we get a tons of requests of like, oh, can we watch it again? So we will have it on YouTube. We'll let you know, contestants. We'll send you a link. And already in our Discord, we dropped Tyler's PDF. Again, thank you so much for the accessible PDF that you dropped. Just in case, I know that there is one person in here who didn't register. So I'm going to just drop in a registration form that we have. But thank you again. I'll see you next week for our screenwriting and directing action workshop. Have a lovely day, everyone.
Awesome.
Bye, Tyler.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.